I hesitate to talk about Andrew Tate because I don't know that much about him, you know. But I'll tell you what I know and what I think, and people can take it for what it's worth. I mean, the first question is, why is he so popular? And the answer is, well, if you have to choose between being depressed and anxious and laying downstairs and covering yourself with Cheeto dust and looking at pornography and being timid and never going out, or, you know, listening to someone like Andrew Tate who says, like, get the hell out there and take the world, like, that's better. That's the shadow, right, speaking in some ways, right? Like, if you're naive and timid and anxious and intimidated and useless and resentful, there's going to be a bit of a monster that needs to call to you to say, you know, gird up your loins and get the hell out there in the world. And so it's better to be a monster than a rabbit in some ways, right? Or at least there's some utility in the more monstrous predatory path that isn't there in the pathetic rabbit path. And that's partly because if you are a pathetic rabbit, you're going to become a predator anyways. You're just going to become a dark, backdoor, backbiting, gossip-mongering, resentful monster.
Society's also pushing that on men in
yes,
particular.
Constantly.
Like, be
well, and
weak.
I knew, look, I knew, and I warned people repeatedly that if the culture kept emasculating men, that men who said, to hell with that, I'd rather be a monster, would become extremely popular. Now, and Andrew Tate is emblematic of that in many ways, because the first thing you got to say about him is that he's genuinely tough, right? So that's not a front. That's not a front. He's a fighter. And you can't take the courageous element of being a fighter away from someone who will actually step in the ring, right? And so now, and then you said Tate's intelligent, and what that means as well is that some of the things he says are going to be of value. Now, why he says those, that's a whole different issue. The thing that disturbs me is that, like, I'm not very fond of the whole online porn thing in any way. And I don't think that it's okay for young women to monetize their sexual attractiveness online. I think that leads to a very dark place for them, even if they're successful, because becoming successful
hurts your soul.
You don't become successful by exploiting yourself. And you might think, well, I can exploit myself. It's like, you can't treat yourself like a psychopath would treat you and get away with it even if the psychopath that's doing that is yourself. That doesn't work. That's why psychopaths aren't very successful, because they exploit themselves just like other people. And so I don't like the whole online porn thing. And then I don't now, my understanding, and I've watched him apparently agree to this characterization online. You know, it's hard to get I'm not trying to be the jury here because I haven't heard the whole damn story, but from what I've watched is he would enter into relationships with women and tilt them in the direction of generating like an OnlyFans following and monetize that and then take a percentage. And there isn't anything about that that I think is acceptable. You know, and you could say, well, you know, women are the captains of their own soul, and if they want to monetize their own attractiveness, then what the hell, why not do it? And if they're going to do it anyways, you know, I can help them, and if I help them, why not take a piece of the action? And the answer is, to me, the answer to that is, well, how about because it's ignoble and wrong? Now, you could counter and you could say, well, you're just too useless and timid to dare to do that, right? And I'd say, you know, point taken. You know, Nietzsche had pointed this out back in the 1850s. He said most morality is cowardice in the guise of morality. It's not like I'm good. It's just that I'm afraid to do that. And Tate would say, well, if you're just not doing something because you're a coward, that doesn't mean you're good. And whereas I'm forthright and tough, and look at me, I climb into the ring, and, you know, I can entice women into, you know, sex work online and take a cut, and why the hell shouldn't I? And I think that if you're a timid and reprehensible, resentful, bottom-dwelling male, that's going to look like an attractive alternative. But it's not the highest form of human behavior, right? It's not acceptable. Like, I think pimps of any sort I truly believe they're amongst the most contemptible of people. I think there's nothing in, you know, with a pimp is, I've got all these hoes and look at me, like, you know, king of these women. And it's like, no, you are the ultimate in pathetic, parasitic predators. There's nothing about that that's heroic. It's just pathetic. Now you might say, if you're that type, well, at least I'm not as contemptible as the cowards who hide behind me. It's like, fair enough, you know. There's ranks of order even in hell, and there's lower and higher demons, you know. And the person who would like to do something terrible but is too cowardly to do it, that's a pretty damn low form of demon. But that doesn't mean that the person who would like to do something and is courageous enough to do it even though it's bad isn't also a demon. And so, you know, I think fundamentally that Tate serves his immediate self in this like impulsive, gratifying manner. And I think that goes along with his, you know, look at me, I'm in a Bugatti. It's like, you know, fair enough, man, in some way.
Do you think what he's been telling men more on the, you know, take responsibility for your life and do things, if that, I mean, it's hard to, I suppose, separate it from everything else.
Well, in actual life, people are complex. No villain is simple. No villain is simple, you know, and in great literature, the great villain is a sympathetic figure. You're kind of on board for 75% of it. And not only that, you might also say, well, if I was in that position, I might do the same thing. Like, it's only a cartoon villain who's 100% evil, you know. And so when you see someone like Andrew Tate, well, first of all, if you have any sense, you think this is a guy that's actually crawled in the ring. And the second thing you think is, well, just because his moral compass is warped and warped in a serious way on the like electronic pimp front, and like I think in a fatal way, personally, that's the highest likelihood, because I don't think you can do that without it permeating everything. That doesn't mean that, you know, he's a two-dimensional villain, you know, or that there aren't things about him that are complex and interesting and potentially even admirable, you know. People are complicated, and even the villainous types are complicated, and it isn't surprising to me at all that he's an attractive figure given the current, you know, war against masculinity. He's exactly the same. He's 100% predictable. He's exactly what you'd expect.
Would you talk to him?
You know, I pretty much talk to anybody.